Welcome everyone to the first in ICA series of online workshops connected with the virtual conference this year in 2021. I'm really pleased to introduce the workshop facilitator, Julia Mant. As you know, the workshop is called Digital Asset Management Systems and Managing Photographic Collections, Practical Strategies for Small and Community Archives, which we think is particularly appropriate for ICA membership. And we're really pleased that the workshop was full, I think, at the beginning of the week. So there's obviously a real need for it. Julia is a professional archivist and former president of the Australian Society of Archivists, and we in the ICA team in Paris in the Secretariat, we got to know her because she played a key role in delivering ICA's annual conference in Adelaide in 2019. She's worked in educational, community and public sector archives since 1999, including the Tranby Aboriginal College, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, and Australia's first university, the University of Sydney. At all three archives, there was a need to overcome resourcing challenges to implement innovative and practical solutions to managing photographs. She has experience using a variety of systems, including digital asset management systems. The DAM system Julia installed at NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Art, was a finalist in the 2019 Photoware Media Management Award. So Julia, thank you very much for doing this for us today. I'm really looking forward to my morning, your evening, I believe. Off you go.
Thank you, Margaret, and thanks to the ICA and Anthea for organising this. Hello, everyone. As Margaret says, my name is Julia Mant, and I'm coming to you from Australia. So it's heading towards the evening here. I'm on Gadigal Wongal land in Sydney, and I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander First Nations in Australia. You know, we have a lot of connections in terms of the archives, both as professional members and in the communities, and we know how critical archives' role is for communities. Now, we have, Margaret is going to join me throughout the day for this workshop, the evening. We've just worked out that I can't share my screen. So Margaret's going to share the screen and the presentation, and hopefully that will all work fine. I will certainly, we'll work through it. We're a smaller group, and it's fabulous you could all join me. There'll be plenty of opportunity for engagement and questions. And I hope you're all familiar with Zoom, but if not, there is the reactions button at the bottom of your screen. And I would encourage you to use that to put up your hand if you want to ask a question, or of course, you can use the chat button as well, and that will allow you to ask a question throughout or make a comment. And I certainly encourage you to do that. With the pandemic, I've been working from home, so I certainly spend a lot of time in online meetings, as I'm sure you do too. All right, so let's get started, and I'll just move to the next slide. Margaret's going to start screen sharing there, and brilliant, that's great. So we might move through the first couple of slides there, and we'll get to that one.
Sorry.
So that's just there. Okay, so just to reiterate, what we're going to cover over the workshop of the 3.5 hours is looking at born digital and digitized photographic collections, digital asset management versus collection management systems, managing multiple stakeholders, scalable customized solutions, and rights management. And I'm very happy if, you know, we find out if you've got a particular interest, I'm sure there'll be time to address that. So do feel free to come with your questions. I can see that there are people who are joining still, so that's no problem at all. Welcome to those as they come through, but we have already started, but there'll be plenty of opportunity to work out what's going on, I'm sure. All right, so on the program, just to remind you of what I've done, because we're all in different time zones, it's wonderful to have so many people joining from across the world, Northern Hemisphere, China, India, Malaysia, I believe, believe there was somebody from Australia as well. I'll see if they've turned up. So we have a few introductions. There's time for that. Then we're going to look at putting photographic collections online and looking in a little bit more detail at the workshop. Talking about digital asset management systems themselves, and then looking at a little bit more in depth as metadata for photographs. I'm sure as practicing archivists, you're very familiar with metadata, but I wanted to particularly look at a feature of it and how that interconnects with digital asset management systems. So we'll spend a bit of time there. We'll have a break. Now I've said 10:50, that'll be the time of the workshop starting at 9:30, but there'll be a 15-minute break when we stop. Then we go back into, and we wanted to break into rooms just to allow for some smaller conversations, which is sometimes a bit easier in smaller groups. And then there'll be also some time to have some dialogue and to finish up at 12:30 there, or whatever time it is in your time zone. So that's just to remind you of the time frame. Thanks, Margaret. All right. Now, before we begin, I thought let's just test out the chat facility. I use it quite a bit in workshops and actually find it can be quite dynamic. So I just thought let's use that rather than go around and hear from everyone individually, which would take time. Let's everyone just spend a few minutes getting to know each other. If you can put through at the same time, just send through on the chat button what you hope to get from today's workshop. Just a short sentence or a few words, whatever you were thinking about is absolutely fine. And you can just start typing and send it through to everyone. It should come through and it'd be great to hear from you all. So we've got a few comments. Some people are starting ideas about managing photograph collections, and I agree, often seems overwhelming and where to start. Some are interested in DAM systems themselves, what's available. Some, open source for DAM. Well, we can explore that a little bit. Practical strategies for managing photos, web-based. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, that's the challenge, isn't there? There's just so many systems out there. And where to start and commence. Practical solutions. That's what I like as well. The small archives. We don't all have a lot of resources at hand. So I agree. And different approaches to managing collections. And I think this is the challenge. And that's great, everyone. I really appreciate your feedback there. It looks like we've had a good range of views probably come through. So we might jump to the next slide there, Margaret. Thanks. So I guess what I really wanted to reiterate for you all today was that I'm not going to recommend a particular system because I really believe that you have to match it to your specifications, your resources, your needs, and they will be different. What I want you to do is to think about how you might be able to apply a scalable approach, utilizing in particular the power of metadata. And that's something that DAM systems do. That doesn't mean that you might come away from this and think, I must have a DAM system, by no means. But I want you to think about the technology and what sits behind it. Because I remember when I started exploring it a few years ago, I found that it really was quite a different approach, and it allowed me to really do some things that I might not otherwise have been able to do with the limited resources that I had. So I have managed over 20 years a range of different photographic collections for different archives, and there've been different solutions each time. And it is about matching the solution to your organization, to the resources that you have. And just so we can talk about these things towards the end as we work through, but I just wanted to note that I'm not recommending any particular solution. What might have worked for me at one place and one time might not suit you. Okay, so it's just thinking about how do you apply some strategies to really not hold you back and wait until you finish. Yeah, that's great, Margaret, no problems. Thank you. Okay, so understanding digital asset management systems. And a few of you have already put through on the chat that you're looking to understand that. So I'm going to assume that you're not that familiar with the technology. And we'll look in a moment at what might be the differences between that and more classic collection management or archives management system. But I guess digital asset, and this is one of, I should say from a terminology point of view, I sometimes think to myself, when is a digital asset not an archive or a record? And I think this is this interesting thing, sometimes the terminology that comes with particular sectors. So digital asset really, we might use that now when we think a lot about digital archives, but the digital asset concept really emerges out of that media sector. And the digital asset management systems are still very much driven by the big media companies, places like Getty Images, for instance, marketing departments are very much connected to DAM products. And so they come about in the early 90s in particular, and then move through the very much desktop-based products at the beginning. And so many of them still have desktop alternatives, and we'll talk a bit more about that as we go through. But they're obviously moved online now. So they were designed particularly to share originally digitized resources or assets, and increasingly now managed born digital assets. Is everybody comfortable with that sort of distinction between the digitized and the born digital? So when I talk about digitized, I'm thinking about particularly analog photos or formats, audio and visual as well, that are scanned or format shifted into a digital form and then saved as a digital object. Of course, we all have phones now, or nobody really has a digital camera anymore, but I suppose professionals still do, but certainly phones, and we have those born digital photographic assets in particular. And of course, the great challenge of the born digital is the sheer volume that comes with it. But nevertheless, with photos, and I think this is often one of the challenges, and we'll come to that a bit further down, is what you get is a lot of content. So that's one of the challenges. So the DAM systems, the DAM environments, they come out of that media world, and they come out of that marketing world particular. They're built to manage media digital assets, as I've written there. And they use a particular metadata standard, which we're going to go into a little bit more further down. So they use what's the International Photographic Technical Standards that photographers use. And so that's a really important thing we'll come back to in our metadata discussion, because they're underpinned by photographic, they're there to manage photographs in particular, and they're there very oriented towards photographers and media or content managers. So we're talking about photographic collections, that could be a benefit for us. They provide editing tools. So this is where you sometimes get into a challenge with an archives, because you can edit content that's in a digital asset management system. So something to keep in mind of. They often integrate with other Microsoft products and social media platforms. They very often integrate with design and publishing software, because that's the sector and the market that they're geared towards. They can also handle digital assets that are PDFs or document management. So that's an interesting thought when you're working in an archives. They do manage other content besides photographics. They're not specific. Often they have record keeping features. They do allow for audit trails so that you can see who's been looking at a particular asset or requested it or edited it. So that's an important feature if you're thinking about it from an archives point of view. One of the great features is they allow for multiple users and templates. And so that's another thing that we'll explore a little bit more. Increasingly, they're looking at machine learning, artificial intelligence, and facial recognition. And this is often very handy for bulk captioning. And you'll see that, although I must say I have a very small dog, and I recently used a photo, and some artificial intelligence ran over the top of it. The photo was of my little tiny dog on a cushion, but the photo took the whole image, and it said large dog on couch, and it's like, this is not a large dog, this is a tiny dog. So I guess our artificial intelligence is only as good as our training that we give it, nevertheless. The dangers of AI. So that's a quick overview. And as we go through the workshop, we're going to come back to some of these points. The key takeaways are the focus on photographers and media, I think, and then what you can do with that content. It's very user focused. Okay, that's an overview. I'm going to stop for a minute and just say any questions. No problems if you haven't. We're moving on to the next slide, but just do feel free as we go through. If you want me to cover anything again, I'm very happy to. There's plenty of time to do so. Thanks, Margaret. We'll go to the next slide.
I moved it already, I think.
Oh, sorry, you did. It looks the same. All right. So are DAM systems different to archive control systems, or, as I note, enterprise content management or library management systems? How are they? Okay. So I've already noted they're designed for image searching, browsing, or reusing. And those features are not always supported by an archive control system. All right. So sometimes, and when I'm saying that, obviously an archives control system is set up for searching, but isn't necessarily great for searching photos. It's not really excellent for doing browsing images. I don't know if you've had this experience if you use an archives control system in your workplace. Enterprise content management systems, something like SharePoint, I'm thinking about, for instance, they're not great. They're basically lists of documents that are there. And so images just tend to be very flat, non-dynamic documents like emails and other Word docs. And they're not conducive to that browsing feature or that visual aspect that we have with photos. They're often object-driven. Now, that's less of an issue for archivists in a digital world where everything ultimately is a digital file. But obviously, contextual relationships are key in an archives. Yes, we like to document the contextual relationships, the file, the container, the agency, the creator, yeah, the people associated with it. And they're not designed for that. But they are very much object driven. So they are about the image, the one, rather than multiple iterations of things. It has been noted that they're not designed to support digital preservation management, and that could be an issue if all you had for a system was a digital asset management system. But of course, there are always workarounds around these things. But I note that it's not an archives control system in that regard. So these are things to be aware of. But the key thing that I really want you to think about as we go through is that a digital asset management, what it does is it reads the inbuilt information that is stored in the digital file. So the information is not kept separately. It's not a metadata envelope attached to a digital file and they interrelate through an ID, for instance. It's no separate catalogue entry. It's not you don't have it in an archives or a library. You might enter a catalogue entry and then relate it to a digital file that's stored in a database. That's not how the digital asset management system is working. The metadata, the catalogue entry, is embedded in the digital object itself. Now, well, we'll note that with archives control systems, increasingly, as particularly as we're moving into the cloud-based system, we find that the metadata, that we will see more of a crossover of this DAM technology and this use of structured metadata. And I note that something like Recollect, which is an archives control system that you may or may not be familiar with, but one that's cloud-based, certainly more people are using that. I think it's based in New Zealand. That would be an example of an archives control system that would be using a similar sort of functionality at heart. So you may find that moving forward, the DAM isn't the product for you, but it uses that feature of inbuilt structured metadata, reading that to generate search and discovery. So I'm just going to pause there for a minute. This sort of harnessing of that will come a little bit more clearer, I believe, if you're not feeling clear about it now as we work through. But could anyone let me know, please, now, if they'd like me to reiterate another or go over another point or clarify a little bit more here? Very happy for you to sort of put your hand up or just even start to talk and say if you have a concern. Is everyone feeling comfortable? I'll take silence as an agreement, but really happy if you feel at all concerned, we can stop for a minute and check. Does that all seem good? I can see. I don't think there's any particular chats on that, Margaret,
No,
are there?
no,
I can't
no.
see any come through. So that's all good. I'm going to assume you're all feeling comfortable with the concepts then that we've covered. Okay, let's jump to the next slide, please.
Oh, sorry.
That's
There
all
was
right.
something for me in the chat that I got distracted by. Sorry.
Now, this is where it's going to be a little challenging because I had some links here, but the links are there, so we can, Margaret may be able to jump to some of them as we go through. It's not critical now to jump, Margaret. I put it, you will all have received these slides in your handouts, so you'll be able to explore some of the links.
I'll be sending them. I'll put a link in the chat at the end of the workshop to the slide set.
So yes, so don't feel like you need to write down any of the links. That's why I put them in there live so that you can explore afterwards. I've just put down a very handful of them there now. I note that, and I note that you can have very expensive DAM. I'm not recommending those ones for you, but you can also have some very scalable products. And it's because media companies are behind them that some of the products have what I call a lot of bells and whistles, which we probably don't need in our archives. So things like Brandfolder, which powers the Getty images. Canto was one of the first DAMs. They had a product called Cumulus, although it's now called Canto Online. Photoware is one that I'm familiar with, but it's a Northern European company, and that has, again, various iterations from a desktop version to different products, which you can build on from that, as many of them do. The one thing that we're going to explore a little bit further as we go is you can use products like Adobe Bridge, which often comes with an Adobe license that you might have. And the next slide will explore that a little bit more. And that is also a digital asset management system that allows you to apply metadata and it reads metadata. So not all DAMs are expensive. And again, this is where you would be, as we move through the project planning, we'll explore some of this resourcing aspect to it. But, and I've put a link there to a list of DAM vendors. It's changing all the time, as you know, with systems everywhere this happens. But some of the things I've noted about them is that, that would make a difference in terms of why you might select one or the other are the number of users that you need and licenses. Do you need one that's desktop-based or web-based? These are important considerations. Obviously, storage too, is the storage on site in a server or is it cloud-based storage? Some of them offer that. There are costs around both aspects. Some is about maintaining hardware, some of it's about volume in the cloud. So, but these are the variables that come into play when you're looking at DAM systems. Many of them, as I mentioned before, have integrated features which you may or may not need. And similarly, the functionality. For instance, with photos, a lot of photographers using DAM products or companies using DAM products would be using it to sell images. So a lot of them would come with, the functionality to be able to attach a price and to order photos. That also isn't necessarily a bad thing. Some archives also will sell access to images, so it might be functionality you need. So there are some DAM examples. Because I don't have the thing there, we're going to explore Bridge a little bit more down the track if we can share the screen. We might have to do that after the break when I work out why I can't share, but we'll see where we land. So we jump to the next slide, please. So I mentioned the Adobe products, and the reason why I come back to this one is that it is very often something that you might already have access to at work. Adobe licenses aren't quite the things they were in the past. They're often quite expensive nowadays, but nevertheless, they're not uncommon and supported by many IT departments. So you might have access to Adobe Bridge, or the other related photographic products are Photoshop and Lightroom. I mentioned Bridge because it's a very low cost option, and it allows you to catalogue and locate images stored on a server or desktop. I can have one on my own home computer and use it, but it can be deployed across the organization. The limitations of that is that it's based on a single user profile. So one of the advantages of having a system, a DAM system, would be that, you're setting it up at a system point, and then you've got users who can then use, you're using a shared set of procedures that are set at the server end or the network end and deployed. Whereas with an Adobe product, if you were wanting to share a keyword set or some metadata fields, you'd have to set that up for each user profile. But nevertheless, if you have access to something like this Adobe product or a similar thing that's available, it could be an extremely efficient way for you to start your cataloging and describing of images ready to deploy it online in some way. I mean, I say that Adobe won't publish them online. Obviously, there's a whole range of other options that are there, and you probably have to be a bit careful these days, because you can suddenly find yourself clicking a few buttons and things are online in a shared way that you didn't know. But of course, there are things like Flickr or other services that you might already use. And so you can get your images ready in Adobe and send them through. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time thinking about that Adobe product. I am hoping I'm going to be able to show you Bridge a little bit further down the track. So how are we going on any questions? I think that looks okay. We haven't got anything coming through.
No, there's nothing in chat that I can see either.
Great.
Next one.
Next one, thanks. All right. Now I've got you thinking again a little bit now. Back into the chat. The horny question of metadata. So what do you understand by metadata, and why is it a critical function of archival management? Let's see what you think. There's no right or wrong. There's a whole lot of different ways to approach it. And I'm really interested to know, when we start, how experienced you are in working with metadata sets and thinking about metadata. So give a few minutes here, no rush. Have a think about what you understand by metadata and why it's important for archives. Thanks. Structured information, essential for managing. Yeah, great. I love Adama's context, 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 yeah. But also for preservation, and I think that's a key point, isn't it? There are different types of sets of metadata for different purposes.
Yeah, content, context, and management.
Yeah. Elements describing the record, yeah. Proper access to archival holdings, information accompanying the record, yeah. Context, discoverability, technical, digital signature. That's a good point too, isn't it?
Yeah.
We might have a range there. I think, yeah, elements, yeah, I think you've all really nailed it on the head, and not surprisingly, all very familiar with it. Key to the doc, key to retrieve the needed object or document, give the researcher idea about the materials. That's right, yeah. So I think important to preserve metadata in order for authentication. Yep. Management, easy retrieval, can describe any aspects of electronic records. A record of the record, that's right. Data about data. I mean, it's critical, isn't it? And yet it still seems, very confusing to so many people out there, and complex. And I think the interesting things as we go through now looking at it is a thinking about where it's situated, where it's there, how you use it to your advantage, but also how you match across metadata sets, because there's not one set of metadata. And we're going to explore that a little bit here, because that's comes into play when we're thinking about harnessing that value of the digital asset management system. So remember when I was talking about the digital asset management system, that what it does is it reads the metadata in the file. Now, I don't know how comfortable you are with that and thinking about that on a daily basis. I have found in my work that you're thinking about metadata and systems that might be attached to the record of the document rather than within the document. But this is something that is often you find when you're looking at a Word document or a Excel or a PDF, and you notice that behind the document or within it, you can read properties of the document and amend them. And it's that aspect that we're looking at here in terms of metadata, but particularly sitting in photos. And it's that aspect that a digital asset management system will read, rather than, as I said, a separate catalogue entry, which applies the metadata to that associated digital file that is usually typically now sitting in a SQL database or whatever, yeah, or in a store, document store, and whereupon you have the envelope and the file. So this is a different sort of form. We're going to look at this metadata that's embedded in it. Margaret, we might jump through to the next slide. Thanks. So I, like you, have highlighted those sorts of things, and you've already addressed a lot of this, but it's structured data for searching, description and rights management. It's also for preservation, as noted. It supports interoperability and automation. It is in digitized assets. And I've sort of said it's like the scroll on the back of the photo or envelope telling you the who, what, why, when. And in a digital asset, it also tells you the how and the where. And to read metadata that's embedded in a file, whether that file's a photo, which is what we're talking about today, or some other form of digital object, you need a viewer to do that. And typically, those things often come, we don't even really notice that we're in a viewer mode when we're looking in our standard lab, on our operating systems, because all that functionality often comes with the programs that we do to run, to do our daily work. But they're viewers that are reading metadata. And that is what we're looking at with this digital asset management system aspect. Next slide, please, Margaret. So now this is where we may have to come back a little bit to it, or you'll have to look up some of the links later, or Margaret might be able to jump onto them. I'll just walk through them first now. I've just noted that there are different types of sets. We're not really particularly looking at the records in context per se, but just noting, for instance, that there are archival metadata sets like the records in context or the Australian Government Record Keeping Metadata Standard. I've just noted the one that is in Australia, federal agencies. No doubt each of your national archives or state archives would have a similar approved metadata set for government information. A key one for photos, but also for published, the oldest one is what often referred to in shorthand as a Dublin core, and it is an ISO standard, and it's used internationally for interoperability particularly, and you will often see online resources require you to include Dublin core, and I've put there that, again, it's an Australian reference. It's the Trove, it's the National Library of Australia's online resource, and I've just put that link there because it's an example of a institution saying, if you're going to send us your digital assets, please make sure you've attached some Dublin core metadata to them. Yeah?
Will I see if I can click through to it?
Yeah, by all means, sure. Okay, yeah, there we go. So, and if you scroll down or up there, you'll see that there's a bit further down, it's telling you all the technical specs and custom AI things that they'll take, record formats, and it just on this published and unpublished one there, for instance, it's saying Trove works with a variety of metadata schemas. Majority is described using Dublin Core. Some Dublin Core terms, fields are also, and some other one DC terms are also accepted, and it's listed some mandatory requirements. We're going to come back to that one a little bit later as well, but that's these are not unusual, I'm sure, to you, types of metadata sets. But they're very often required for if you're sharing digital assets.
Shall I go back?
Jump back to the slide, thanks. Yeah. So the Dublin Core metadata element set, which we can look at in a minute, and the International Press Telecommunications Council, or the IPTC photo metadata standard, we'll spend a bit of time on that. The most widely used standard to describe photos. And again, I mentioned before, digital asset management systems often use it because they're the same sector: news agencies, photographers, photo agencies. Now, it has core and extension fields, and it's often seen IPTC core, IPTC extension. They're just sort of a whole range of metadata fields. And I did note that they also have a new feature released last year where they're mapping IPTC fields to Google Images. So again, if you're trying to get images out there, Google is going to be able to read those IPTC metadata standards. Before we jump and have a look at the IPTC a little bit more, I'll just note that Adobe's extensible XMP, you might be familiar with that, also an ISO standard. So Adobe Products, the range of them, will come with this XMP metadata fields that are built in there. So if you're looking at Adobe properties, it will be XMP metadata. And I just note the standard EXIF, which is the standard for storing interchange information in digital photography. Almost all our computers, whether Mac or Windows operating environments, you will pick up EXIF data as a base standard in any of your property fields. We'll come back to the IPTC in a moment. I don't want to get too bogged down into that. I want to have a little look at some of the metadata that's embedded and explore that a little bit. Thanks, Margaret. So the next slide. So I've just popped up here a couple of examples just from a computer where you can see these metadata sets embedded in the file. So whether you're a Mac person or a Windows person, you're probably familiar with the look of those particular screenshots. So there's a photograph taken from a visit I did in 2019 to Paraparaumu in New Zealand. And you can see there's some information that is just, if I click on the info attached to that photo, I haven't been a very good job at cataloguing my own home photo because it's still called image, but you can see the date captured there, what phone I used to do that with. I could, if you notice, add caption and a keyword. But it's also captured the geolocators. That's all just embedded, and that's that EXIF embedded data that comes with each image. Yeah, that's metadata. The other image is one that I've copied from just from the website because I haven't got a Windows one that I've used at home, and that would probably be very familiar. Again, you open up the properties field of a document and you click on the details tab, and you can see description, title, subject, rating, tags, comments. That's a metadata set, and that will link back to the EXIF data or to the XMP data, or to another set. But if you're looking, if Dublin Core expects you to have title as a required field, and you've typed in title and your properties details field, and this is what we're going to explore here, you have given a metadata tag that can be read through a whole lot of different viewers that read that type of field, that field called title. And what we're going to do is explore how we leverage the inbuilt metadata that sits behind each digital, that's in each digital file or object, whether it's a photo, or you can see this stuff as well in a Word doc or PDF, but we're looking at photos, of course, that sits there, how you leverage that to then build a photo collection that you can take online or through some other means to your stakeholders. Okay, I'm going to pause for a minute. I'm going to move on to some more examples of this type of embedded thing. Has anyone got any questions here? Feel free to if it's all making perfect sense, I'll assume silence means that's the case, but do feel free to jump in if you know. Otherwise, we'll jump to the next slide. We'll explore this a little bit more, this concept. Okay, thanks, Margaret. So here now, I'm actually using Bridge here, which is what I'm hoping to be able to show you live. But this is just a couple of examples of in Bridge. You can see the photo there. I'm still in New Zealand here. It's the Kapiti Coast, beautiful part of New Zealand, if you can get there. And you can see that you can read some of that EXIF metadata. You can see it's got the things that were captured before. It's technical metadata. We're not so interested in that from the point of view of our stakeholders, although you can see it embedded there. But then you start to see that there's actually some other metadata that if I input it in, I could read, and it's those IPTC core metadata fields. And Bridge allows me, and other digital asset management systems allows me to attach information via this metadata set that sits in that, again, behind that image. And you can see that if I look at the one on the right, the file properties have, you can see that's the classic sort of metadata. You can see it's got the digital file name, document type. That's all that classic EXIF technical metadata that comes with the photography. But what I can do, and this is what we're going to explore, is I can actually attach more metadata sets to that photo using the IPTC core fields that then sit also in that photo. They're not a separate catalog entry. They sit in it. And then I'm going to be able to leverage that in my digital, my DAM system. Okay, next slide, please, Margaret. Now, here's another version of looking at a metadata set. This is using Bridge again, but it's a little bit more complicated and it's from a different system. But you can see, hopefully you can see, or you'll be able to, maybe we can scroll in a little bit. I want to have a look at that bottom left-hand corner, that these are photos that were used for an archives. And if you have a look down the bottom there, you can see there are some keywords, and those keywords are very specific to this organization. They're, got particular names, some actually quite famous names like Mel Gibson. They've got a theatre, NIDA theatre. They've got second-year students, right? So this is a keyword set that was generated for this organisation, and I can attach those very specific keywords to these photos using Adobe Bridge or PhotoStation, or a fancy digital asset management system, or anything that allows me to read, to view the metadata fields from the Dublin Core or IPTC metadata standards and attach them at the back of these images. So you can customize the information to suit your needs and your stakeholders. Yeah, okay, so that's great. And you can do a whole lot of other functionality, which I'm hoping we'll explore, which is to actually apply these things in bulk. But that's an example of both a reader and a metadata tagger Bridge. Okay, next slide, please. Thanks. So then this is using a digital asset management system. It's actually a desktop version of it. So it looks a bit old. It wouldn't be what you'd customize now you'd see if you were looking at a web-based version. But it's useful because it sort of brings it all together. And again, this is creating your customized metadata set, which I'm going to encourage you to do according to agree, using fields, those quite detailed. And we're going to come back to the IPTC one to look at it in the Dublin Core. There's a lot of metadata elements that you can use. So I encourage you as much as possible to use standardized metadata that has agreed use, and you work out how you're going to use it. But what you can do then is you can create your own customized style set or metadata set that suits your particular collection. And this is the back end, as it were. Again, I'm just attaching metadata to the image. I'm not doing a separate catalog entry. I'm attaching metadata that sits behind that image, that original source image, and stays with it unless I use some other sort of application to take it off. And then you've got to, so that's a different matter. But it travels with this image. It doesn't leave it. It's tagging, it's stamping the image. And you can see it's getting quite complex now. It's looking at the title. Title is not the same as the image file name. Yeah, we all know that. Title in most metadata sets needs to be short. And that there is some, and we're going to go back to that in a minute, but they often have quite specific character or word length. The headline is a bit longer. The caption or description often has a lot of characters are allowed, and you can see that particular, well, you might not be able to see, but I can tell you that that particular caption says what the theatre production was. It's got quite a lot of information. It's got names. I'm searching the metadata that sits in that image, and it's going to bring me back that image. So I can get quite a lot of complex information embedded in my metadata set that sits with my image. I've got dates. I've got creator, and creator, these are coming out of a photo mindset. Creator means the photographer, could also mean the artist. Copyright notice, you're attaching a copyright to that. Now, we'll talk about copyright as we go through, but you can see that you're affixing a metadata tag that stamps it with the copyright information. Depends on your own copyright laws, but you can do that. You can put in rights, you can put in artwork. I've got specific IPTC extension fields that I've attached to this style set, which actually try and identify the artist. It's not for this particular photo, but it's useful for some of my other sets. I've got keywords, and again, I've come up with a keyword set to standardize that. Yeah, we like to standardize things so, and that we can structured data as much as we possible to derive consistent results and application, categories of information. I've got caption writer, so you know who's affixed that metadata, who's done the registration entry. All of this is sitting in that image as metadata that can be read by any metadata file viewer that reads this level of metadata. Okay, so this is what a DAM system will do. If we jump to the next slide, I'll just show you that as one more tab that I had, which I did. I must have, okay, this is the version, this version of what we're looking at now was then the web-based version. So it's the more sophisticated DAM version of the metadata set, but it's doing exactly the same. It's just doing it in a web-based online version. And you can see again, the headline, the description is there, the created date, you've got the image there. And if you see that there are tabs there, there's file details, image details, rights management. That's just structuring how we're viewing the metadata. So this is an interface with a digital asset management system that I'd installed at an organization. But again, really just to show you that all that is not a separate catalog entry. It's reading from the image, the original image that is stored. In this case, it was stored not in the cloud, but in a server, but it might have easily been in the cloud storage as well. And then you set up the viewer, the display, to show those metadatas. You don't have to show all your metadata fields, and you can see that these are customized to support the particular user needs. And then you can start to see that there's some other functionality like download in there, and that's what some of the functionality that you get in a digital asset management system. That's not live here now. This actual digital asset management system is not open to the public, but you know, if you were to look at, say, Getty Images online, you'll see that you can buy and download images with rights management, and all that's that additional functionality that you have. I think the next slide actually shows the thing that I thought was going to come next, Margaret. Oh yeah, this is that. And again, this is looking at it at the desktop version rather than the web-based version, but it's doing the same thing. This was just to show you, give you a sense of how much detail you can actually stamp on a photo. One of the tricky things with this particular organization was that you didn't necessarily know who was in a photo. It was student productions. If they weren't captioned, how were you going to know that that photo had that person in it? So we came up with an idea where we, there's a few people coming in, Margaret. I'm wondering if they maybe were out by the time difference or something. because it's the half hour. So that might be why. So hello new people joining us. Sorry, we've already started, but we'll keep going and be time for a little bit of discussion if you're not sure where we're at. So I'm just explaining this screen here. This actually had the full cast stamped. And what that allowed you to do is to search using your digital asset management system searching or any file, metadata file viewer, for specific images that might contain those people who was in that cast of that production. I mean, the specifics of why we did it doesn't really matter for this learning. The point is you can actually use this metadata tagging to put quite a lot of information in, but also to be able to search on those digital asset management, digital assets that you're managing, yeah, by searching by names. And the key thing about this was that because we didn't have time to stamp each, maybe there's 500 images per production. We didn't have time to individually identify who was in each photo. So a quick way of doing it is that we stamped the cast info for the whole show against every image that was related to that show. And you could do that with an event or something would be the same. Who was involved with that event? Who was involved with that particular meeting? You could stamp it as long as you understood that what you were searching for was all the people who might have been at that event, not necessarily those who are in the, it's not a caption, it's a stamp of full attendance list. Then you can return images. And it was just a really easy way for us to give meaning to the image without having to spend time and work out what each image was or who was in each image. So that was just a little bit of a strategy at play there. But it proved very useful for this particular organization. So that's just a little feature of that. What's on our next slide? Okay. So pause for a moment. I'll take say hello to the new people who've joined us. We're talking about metadata that's embedded in photos. And we're looking at a particular nature of metadata that sits behind a photo rather than as a catalogue entry of metadata. Is everyone following okay? You're all feeling comfortable? Any questions at the moment? Feeling good about that all? It all makes sense? Okay. Okay, not sure what I mean, stamp the attendance. Yeah, okay. So I was using, or maybe tag, Sintra is a better way for me to describe it. So I'm tagging the image. There's a field, I've called that field, I've customized it. I've said this field is called, might be called description, or it might be called people who've attended this event. Or in the case of the photo, the slide that I showed you, it was people who were in the cast of the production. And all I've done is I've listed it, and every photo has got that list of people sitting behind it. So that there's a very detailed, rather than a one-word metadata field, it's actually a very detailed field with a lot of information in it. And that lot of information is attached, embedded in our image. So it probably feels quite comfortable if I say the metadata field asked for the title of the production, Much Ado About Nothing. But when I say the metadata field also asked for everyone who attended that event, and I was able to list the whole lot of people, and that information also sat in the image, that's a lot of detail that you can attach to an image and embed in it. So when I use the word stamping, I'm sort of meaning you're stamping the image with that information. So maybe that's a bit of a colloquialism that I'm using there. Another way would be to say it is I'm tagging that photo with all the people who attended it. Again, I'm not doing it as a separate catalogue image. I'm actually embedding that information in the image itself. Is that clearer, Sintra? Thanks, great. The value of it is that I can then search on that information. So metadata in this sort of sense doesn't always have to be short and sharp, which is often, I think, how we think of metadata. And there's an advantage of having short and sharp and structured, but you can also attach more detailed information this way. Jeanette's asked, is the number of characters fixed in this software or did you set limits? And that's what we're going to look at now, Jeanette, exactly that point. Because some metadata sets, there are specific field lengths or character lengths. So what we're looking at here on the screen is a little bit of an excerpt from a style set that I created that matched the particular metadata fields that we were using. And remember, the objective was always to use known, existing, identified metadata from existing metadata sets. And those sets might be Dublin Core or DC. They might be IPTC, which we talked about, IPTC extension, IPTC core. They might be Photoshop, which is otherwise the Adobe XMP metadata set. And these are structured, described metadata sets that are, in an earlier slide, we had some links to, and we can go into them a little bit more detail as we go through. We're going to do some project planning in that. I just want to explain this particular slide first for you, where I've said, okay, my metadata set needs title. Most photos need a title. This is not the image file name, right? It's not the one that is followed by the .jpeg or .tiff or .document format. It's the title embedded, that properties field, it's the title embedded in the image that a metadata or a DAM is going to be able to read. A file viewer or a digital asset management system is going to read title as the title of the photo. And I'm going to draw from the Dublin Core title field. That requires no more than 64 characters. And I actually thought it was less, but it's the description writer's less there. Yeah, that's 32. So it's a while since I've looked at the actual set again, but we can do that. And you see that on the far right, sorry, the header's cut off, 64, 256, 2000, they're all the character lengths, which is Jeanette's question. Is the number of characters fixed in this software? So what I've tried to do is I've tried to use from known derived metadata sets that have instructions in them. We're going to look at those instructions. And they vary often. You'll be familiar with them because that's always the case with fields that we use in metadata. They'll have a field length. And what I've done is I've said headline is the next one. Headline, it's an XMP. It's also an ITPC core field headline, and it's got 256 characters. Description also aligns to the Dublin Core field description, also aligns probably to the IPTC field caption or description. I have to check what it is. And so in the middle section there after description, I've written what I'm expecting, to see in that field. But I've got a lot more. I've got 2000 characters in that. Description writer, it's a required field. That's where you can see that it's a little asterisk on it. And again, it's only a short field. So you have to put initials under it. And then in this case, I had a particular one called event, and that's very much a user-defined field. But you can see that it actually relates to an IPTC extension metadata set, and it allows me to do 256 characters. If we jump to the next slide, we expand this a little bit more. We see some other, Margaret, if you wouldn't mind jumping to the next one for me, thanks. Here's some more in this set. Date created. I've said, well, this is the format it should be in. It aligned to almost all the metadata sets would have date in it. In this case, it's the XMP one or Photoshop, and it's a date field. Marked, I've said copyright status, that's an XMP rights field. It's Boolean, yes or no. Creator, also photographer. It comes out of the Dublin Core creator set. Credit, copyright notice, rights usage term, special instructions. And you can see they're all terms that align to different metadata sets. And you might think to yourself, why can you use different metadata sets altogether? The reality is you're tagging or as I said before to Sintra, stamping, but I'm tagging my photo with agreed standard metadata sets that are used in photographs and read by all DAM systems, from properties fields in our Windows operating system photo viewer, in our Mac operating system, in Adobe Bridge, Adobe Products, Adobe Lightroom, Adobe Photoshop will all read these fields. The digital asset management system will pick up all these fields that are read there and display them. If you align them to things that are known, structured, rather than user-defined, you can still stamp an image with some user-defined fields, but what you'll find is that as you migrate that image through to another digital asset management system, you might progressively move it along. Because it's very user specific or system specific, you might lose the ability to really interpret it well. So you try to keep it on structured sets that are known, and you can find that 90% of all fields you'll be able to match to what your user needs are. Jeanette, does that make sense, what I've said there? Hopefully that's answered your question, and hopefully everyone else is feeling comfortable with that. I know that those who joined at the half hour might be feeling a little bit confused. We'll go over it a bit again after our break, but we've got a little bit more on this session now, looking at metadata. We might, so this is where I was going to jump to look at Bridge itself and some metadata, which is going to be tricky without my being able to share my screen. So what we might do, Margaret, is we might jump back to that slide where I had the metadata examples, the IPTC, the links there, and we might jump into a couple of those metadata sets. Okay, on so if we just look at the Dublin Core 1, they're examples, and you might be familiar with Dublin Core. I mean, it's pretty very standard for many years. But you know, there are 15 elements that are with a minimum of 5, and you can see that each of these will be defined with some details and length, and name, label, URI, definition, type of term, and then there's some other ones that are there. If we jump back to the IPT standard, the photo metadata one, not the one on the, yeah, that one, thanks. Yeah, and if we scroll right to the bottom of that page there, we can see some of the sets that they're using, because they've made it quite difficult to suddenly get to the standard. You can download it yourself, I'll send you, but for instance, these are some of the subject topics that they have, which is very detailed because it's for photographers to use for their own management of images. Scroll a little bit more further down and you can see they give an example, metadata usage examples. Here is an image by an independent photographer, and you can see some of the fields. These are the IPTC core and extension fields. And you can see there's city, copyright owner, country, ISO code, creator, creator's contact information, creator's job title. Obviously, they're very focused on creator because they're designing this to support press photographers particularly, or news agencies, credit line, date created, description, digital source type. And it's interesting, they define the digital source type. There are 5 required. You can put one in yourself, you can do some user-confined ones, but you know, you have to describe it as original digital capture of a real life scene, or it might be a digitized image and things like that. So some quite useful information, again, embedded in the photo. Image creator, featured organization, instructions, intellectual genre, IPT scene. And in the metadata set itself, all of these will be defined, how you use them, what's the character length. And what you would do is you go through and you think, do any of these apply to my particular images or my particular needs for an archive? And if I'm going to use the field person shown, which is a very structured field, or intellectual genre, how am I going to use that in my archives? What's the standard length for it? And will I accept it as my metadata set? You can see the keywords that they've applied to that image. And again, you can set your own keywords. I showed you that in one of the examples that I had with the performance photos that we had, that we set them up for ourselves. You can attach the licensor when you're trying to sell the images. That's important. You could also attach a link to, say, Creative Commons if you were going to use those sort of attribution licenses that are there. The job ID, if it's related to that. And there's a lot of, each of those fields that are on the left there are defined in the IPT set itself with the length. Now, hopefully that's given you a little bit of background. I'm conscious of the time. I've said we'll have a break now. I like to keep that because I feel like everyone's attention, you know, we all need to stand up after an hour and a half and sort of move a little bit. I think that's healthy. All right. Hello, everyone. Back for the second part of the workshop, and the good news is that I've been able to sort out the securities permissions things. It didn't let me share the screen, so now I get to be the one jumping back and forth. So that'll make it a bit easier, because I did want to show you Adobe Bridge, which is a very simple digital asset management system that many of us have access to. Might be something that you have access to in your organization already. So what I might do, if you're happy to indulge me, I'll do a little bit of demonstration of Bridge. Then I wanted to move, as you remember in our second part of this particular workshop, was we were going to look at some project planning and break into some smaller groups. And that might be able to, you know, maybe coming from that, we'll be able to see where there are things that you're not quite clear about, where things you feel comfortable about, and answer some of your specific questions. So we've got plenty of time in this section there. I know the first part was a bit of a race through what a digital asset management system is. There are many types of them. Some of them are desktop based, like Bridge, which we'll look at. Some of them are online. There are many different metadata sets there. You were all very comfortable with the concept of metadata. So hopefully you felt comfortable with the idea that there are different metadata sets and we need to match them. I think sometimes where it takes a little bit of getting used to, you might feel comfortable with what's been said so far. But if you're feeling uncertain, you might be like me when I first started to think that it's like, how does it really work that there are all these different things that can sit behind a photo? So I was going to show you just a very simple example in Bridge. And you could see maybe you have access to that or something similar in your workplace and can test it out a little bit. As I said, you can also do it with some other file viewers and change things and understand that these are XMP properties or metadata fields that you need to change. So I'm going to share my screen now, and I'm going to do two things. One, first of all, I'm going to show you, as I mentioned, the IPTC allow you to download an image. And if you open up that image, can you see, there's the image there. And what I've done is I've opened up, I'm just got to move my screen and I've got this, okay. The panel is causing a little bit of problems there now, but let me just jump back to my screen. Can you see what I can see, which is this, is basically the properties that sit behind that image, and it features all the IPTC fields that are available that sit behind that image. The way that I get to that is I click on an image, I then go to Show Inspector because I'm using a Macintosh, and unfortunately it doesn't let me move that through, but that image has got all these fields attached behind it. Okay, so you have to just remember that. And I'll send you the link so that you can try that as well and get an idea of the IPTC fields that sit behind each image that's marked with their metadata. So then I'm going to move to another image. Might make that mapping. This is actually something that I used. Someone else created it, but what it does, if you can see, it shows you. It's a little bit older. Some of the IPTCs have changed, but it says field. The IIM field 05. It's called object name title, 64 characters. What this person has done is they've actually mapped the IPTC field to other metadata sets that are in there. So you can see he's mapped it to document title in Breeze browser. It's a little bit old. I don't know if that one's still a metadata or a a dam that's out there. He's mapped it to object name in image info, which was another digital asset management system that this person was mapping it to. But that's a really good way if you do that. It's a little bit like what I did in the one that I showed you that I'd created, but he's mapped it across. So, you know, special instructions, which is field 40 in the IPTC, 256 characters, it maps to instructions and all that. So that's one that's pretty easy. In any viewer, you would map it to a field called special instructions would be mapped to instructions. Things like locations, credit, they're all fairly standard, although I note in this particular digital asset management system, the field is called provider. So, you know, that's a thing that we probably have all done in our jobs before as archivists. We've mapped fields, perhaps we're exporting data from one side to another and we're mapping those fields. Writer, editor, things that are about people often do change. This one's called editor. This one in this set, it's called description writer or, but also description writer. So you can see that you're mapping that. And that's how you would align your particular system and the fields that it shows for the photos against the fields that sit behind it that are stamped, which are perhaps XMP or IPTC or the EXIF fields. Okay. So that's that concept. And again, when we pause, I'm happy to take any questions on that. Now I'm going to share for you Bridge, and I'm hoping that my screen is going to let me do both. I may have to just make my Bridge a little bit smaller. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the size of the images so we can see them. So what I've done here is I've just move that shorter. We can see it like this. So Adobe Bridge, this is a product. I happen to have Adobe product on my home computer, and I downloaded Bridge, and I might use it to actually organize my own photos. This set of photos, though, comes from the ICA ASA conference that we did in Adelaide, South Australia in 2019. And so I've just put some of the images here. And look at those images in a whole lot of different ways, as you saw that I just did. I can look at them like this. I can look at them like that. I can look at them with information against them. I can look at them as a list. If I open up one, you'll see, let me just get rid of that. You'll see that it was designing the archive in Adelaide, and that's the photo. Yeah. If I go to my inspector or properties in the Windows environment, I can see that it's got EXIF technical information already sitting behind it. Remember, this is not a catalog. I've not done anything to this image whatsoever. This comes with the image. General. Oh, Anthea's raised a hand.
Sorry, Juliet, we can't see, I think, some of the screens that you're showing right now, because I think they're more detailed technical screens and we can't see them. Sorry.
No problem. Thanks for that. Thanks for letting me know. It doesn't. So could you see that preview? Could you see the photo here?
Now we can see it. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Brilliant. Thanks. Sorry, I probably do need to do that. Thanks for that. You can't have to change it each time. So this photo here is one of the photos in that small set of photos that I had. That's what it looks like. Done nothing to this image whatsoever. I'm using, now again, I'm not sure, can you see that little?
Yeah, I saw the drop down.
And you can see this is all information that's coming already embedded in this file. There, it's even got the GPS information. It says that I was in Adelaide. It gives you the date. So there's so much information already in this embedded in this image, but not information that's particularly useful in an archive necessarily, right? So we want to put in information that's useful for our archival users. So I'm just going to jump out of there again and share my Bridge version. Okay, so I'm back now in Adobe Bridge. Hopefully everyone can see that. So that was the image that we just looked at there. Now, it's a little bit confusing when you look at it. Bridge has got some, there's some things that you can do up here. There's some keywords that I can look at. If I look at my metadata and look at a photo, oops, I didn't want to, you can see that. I want to look at my metadata, and I can, down here, hopefully you can see this area here. I'm going to get rid of that panel. This is my metadata reader. Now, it may be easier to look at one image. If we look at this image here on the screen, I'm now going to open up some metadata sets. Again, I've not done anything to this image. They're just, this Adobe Bridge is my file viewer. It's my digital asset management system. It's a simple version of it, but it's doing the same things as the highly expensive, complicated ones that we might never afford. And it's reading the file properties. The file properties are many of those things that come embedded. They're technical file properties that come. You can see the file name. The JPEG, it's a JPEG file. Okay, not so interested in that. We've already looked at that. Here's my IPTC core fields. Nothing's filled in because I've not attached them, but I could start to fill in something here. And I can do it in a random, unstructured way. I can also do it by applying a metadata template, and we'll do both very quickly. I'm going to give this a name, which is the Designing the Archive, the DTA banner, banner at conference venue. Okay, and I'm going to give it a tick so that it's tagging that image. All right, so this image now has a title that's embedded in it. I haven't changed, I might also give it a city, and I might say that it was in Adelaide, right? And I'm doing this just randomly on one image. In your archives and with your photos collection, you're not going to do it so randomly. You're going to do and apply some templates, and you're going to do it in a structured way. But you can see how I can just use this to edit one. Usually in an archives, we don't edit one, we do multiple things. The copyrights say, I might say this is actually copyrighted, okay, because I took the photo. I might say, well, actually, I think I do want to edit the image. I'm going to call this image, remember, this is the file name, not the title. I'm going to call it, it's going to be short because it's a title, and I might say, whoops, is it going to let me? No, it cannot be modified. I've got to do it up here, maybe up here. I'm going to modify it up here. I'm going to call it DTA banner, or I'll give it an underscore banner. Yeah. Tab. No, didn't want to save because I forgot to save it. So they're always saved. Try it again. Banner. And hopefully it's maybe just because my screen is a bit small. I think now it's saved, and I'm going to save it here. And you can see that changing up there has changed it here. And again, that's a persistent file name that can be read by any file viewer, metadata file viewer. Remember, I've put some IPTC copy information here. I might put the creator. I'm going to put my name, okay, J Mant. All right. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to open this one up, again, the photo, and I'm going to go to tools, and I'm going to show inspector. Now I'm just going to change my screen so that you can see that image. Can you see that image? I've opened up the image again, yeah? Everyone can see? Show inspector.
Yes,
and
yes, we can.
You can see that it's now got an extra tab on it. Again, I'm just reading the properties that sit behind this photo. And it's now added in for me a tab called IPTC. That wasn't there before. And it's reading all the information that I stamped in Bridge. And it's now reading it. I'm not actually reading this in Bridge anymore. I'm reading this in the properties field of this photo. And I could read those same fields in any digital asset management system. I could potentially read them in an archives control system if it read metadata directly from it rather than did a catalog entry. But that's where my digital asset management comes into play, because it's going to read these fields that are standard. So that's a really easy way, I hope, to see how you can attach metadata. I've done that just on the one and on the fly. And I'm going to jump back to Bridge very quickly, because I'm going to show that what you can also do is you can create a metadata template. And I could create one called conference In fact, I have created one before, so I'm just going to open that one up. And I'm going to go append the metadata conference 2019. I'm going to attach it to there. And that's going to, I didn't put any information in it, so I need to create something. Edit my metadata template. I'm going to, here we are, I've got one which has only got a short number of fields, a bit less in it. And I'm going to say, I want all of them to have JMant as the creator, okay? And I'm going to save this. Okay, there's the template. Do you want to replace it? Yes. And then I'm going to say, I want all these images in my folder. I want all of them to have the metadata attached. And I'm going to say append metadata conference 2019, multiple values. And I can see now all these images didn't have my name on them. They're now all stamped with my name as the creator, or in my, I might know creator as the photographer. Okay, so you can do that en masse, and you can do that in multiple different ways. And you can buy a very fancy digital asset management system that does that, or you can do it with something like Adobe Bridge. Happy to come back to this a bit more if we have time. I'm hoping that gives you a little bit of a taste of it. It's obviously just a very short intro to it. Bridge is readily available if you have an Adobe license. So I'm going to suggest that if you can get access to it, it's a really good way to play around with metadata and sets. If you remember, I said there was a disadvantage of it. And one of the disadvantages is that you can set it up for yourself, but you can't really set it up for everyone in the organization to use exactly the same things that you've done on the fly. So you'd have to give them all keywords, a keyword set that they could apply and import. And you can do things like that. It's perfectly reasonable and doable, but I wouldn't do it more than, say, for a small group of people who are all working in the same area of the archives. I wouldn't do it across an organization. But just to say to you, you can use even a simple DAM like that to tag images. Does that fulfill any questions? By all means, send them through now. Again, if you remember, you've got the reactions to put your hand up to ask a question or to send it through on the chat. It's a very short flavor of what you can do with a digital asset management system, and you can do it at home, but hopefully that's given you a little bit of idea about that. As we go through the project planning, that might give you a bit more, okay, because we'll come back to some of these concepts. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to share my let me share. I know what I need to do. I need to put my slides there. I'm going to try that again and share my slides, which Margaret was doing before. So let me just get them up. There we go. Share. Okay, so we're up to this the section where we were going to do a little bit of project planning, and this is a good opportunity for now you to do some thinking about it and to some sharing of experiences. First of all, I'm just going to talk a little bit about putting photos online and what are some of the key considerations when you are designing a collection system for photographs. And again, this is an opportunity for you to, oh, I didn't put it in red, so I didn't recognize it, but for you to send through your responses on the chat line. And we'll talk about them. Just anyone have a think when you're designing a collection system for photos, what are some of the issues that might come to mind? Oh, and while you're thinking about that, I noticed that Patricia has sent a query, which is it possible to load metadata massively from an Excel, for example? Well, what you can do is you can import fields, that's right, into, so some of them would do it from Excel, definitely. Others were you would set up a template where you would have a lot of information there. And we, one organization, we used a desktop version and we tagged 70,000 images within a few months using bulk uploads, bulk metadata tagging and templates. So yes, you can do that. So if you had an existing Excel catalog, I guess is what you're thinking about, Patricia, and you wanted to then import that, there would be ways that you could do that. In terms of directly from Excel to the digital asset management system, I'd say you'd want to check on the DAM capabilities, but certainly harnessing the template feature that they have allows you to do bulk tagging of images in a set without having to do it one by one. And you can always then attach individual things like captions and descriptions of people in the photo and do that individually. So one of the things we're going to look at in our project planning is bulk, and that might be one of our key considerations for if we're thinking about a photo. Has anyone got any ideas that are other things? I mean, some of them you highlighted them before. How do I do it with resources? That might be an issue. If you're not sure exactly what I'm getting at, I'll jump to my next screen because I've put some of those ideas that I had, things that I think about when I'm designing for a collection of photos. And these are some of the considerations that I might have. You might have others, but these are things that definitely questions of access. It's something for us in every archive. Are these for public access, only for in-house, and so you can't sell, there's no public right to access them? Or is it a bit of both? You want some to be public and some to be just available to the organization? Are there privacy considerations of subject rights with the images? So you might have an artworks that you're looking at and there might be moral rights there for the artist, and you need to take that into account. The big issue that I find for photos, and we almost all of us have it, is copyright management. I don't know if you sympathize with me here, but it's definitely something that is in every archives that I've ever worked at, which has images. It's also true for documents, but there's something about images that makes it very complicated. When we move into audio and video, it's even more complicated because of the nature of rights that are embedded in audio and video. So copyright management is really key. Licensing, selling images. Are you going to use Creative Commons? Is there going to be an attribution license that you attach to things? Digitization standards. Now, this is something that, maybe 20 years ago when people were looking at digitization, and maybe it's something you struck now, it's cheaper and quicker to just scan quickly, put up a reference copy and have that. But then when you need to do preservation, you have to do that whole work again. And then there's a lot of wear and tear on the archives to pull them out, put them on a scanner and then scan again for preservation quality. So might be useful to think about is, I just want to scan it once. I want to scan it to preservation level, but that's way too big to be viewed online or to be viewed by somebody who's just browsing images. Yeah, so you need to be able to see the access version. And then we flagged it a little earlier before, digital preservation considerations. How can you make sure that this digital object is going to be available in 100 years or more as a permanent record, given the wear and tear of it? You may be familiar with the idea that when you open up a JPEG, every time you open that JPEG, it's lossy. It loses some of its quality. So every time you go to a network file share and open up an image, you're affecting the preservation quality of that image. So a system might be a really good thing to put an interface between. You're not actually opening up the image, you're opening up a rendition of it, an access version. Okay, so there's some considerations that I have when I'm thinking about photos. So that's we've discussed some of the value of having this scalable product that can deliver to your stakeholders, which might be the people that you work with, and also your archival researchers at the end. Does anyone, you pop it into the chat, whether you think that's been useful, whether you found some things there, whether you've got more questions around it. Hopefully it's given you a bit of a sense of what you can do and you could start doing now if you wanted to, or you could start exploring this option or the understandings, as I said, of structured metadata to leverage the information that you do know about these images. I found it very useful, and I hope you've learned something here now that you can take away and apply in some way in your archives and work. Happy to take any last questions. if you looks, interested, useful, you could start to tag your images, exactly, which means that people can then find them, and then you can demonstrate the value of what you do and how important it is. And if you do it in a way that doesn't reopen that image every time you go back to the file share and have to reopen it, you're actually doing digital preservation. Thanks, Jeanette. Great to have your involvement, and thanks for contributing. Really appreciate that.
I just want to give a huge thank you to Julia for preparing. I know it took a while for you to prepare your presentation and to think it through and to give us the time on a Friday evening, which is one of the evenings that I absolutely don't really want to be working myself. So it's very, very generous of you to share both your time and your experience and expertise. And thank you to the participants for sticking with it. We know that it can be quite challenging to attend a workshop online for 3 hours at a stretch. So thank you very much for participating, and good luck with your dam projects, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks you all for participating. It's been great.